Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad to get your phone calls and your emails on this Conspiracy Theory Thursday. You want to dial into the best conversation in talk journalism? It's 866-HEY-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. Emails go to talk@larslarson.com. As you know, the CDC has not said anything about closing down schools, although New York City has shut down its entire public school system today, signaling that the second wave of the coronavirus has arrived, and they're saying that once the infection or positivity rate on tests showed 3% over a 7-day rolling average, that is the most conservative threshold of any big city school district in the country. So that means 1.1 million students in that case are not going to be going to an in-person education in a bricks and mortar classroom. I thought we'd talk about that with Jonathan Butcher, who's a senior policy analyst at the Center for Education Policy at Heritage. Jonathan, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you.
So, Jonathan, are teachers' unions going to be calling the shots on whether or not parents can send their kids off to a physical school this year and perhaps next year as well?
Well, they've been pressuring all over the country. Look, back in the summer, the American Federation for Teachers released an announcement saying that they would back local strikes if teachers felt like the school reopening plans were, quote, not safe. Now, given the evidence that we have about schools not being super spreaders, it's hard to justify what unions are pushing for right now.
So tell me this, you know how to read between the lines on this. What are they pushing for? Are they just saying, do they have an honest concern about the disease? Or are they saying this is another opportunity? As Rahm Emanuel famously said, never let a crisis go to waste, that here's an opportunity to press for more benefits and to get some leverage. Or is it legitimately a concern about teacher health?
Well, I can give you the facts, right? When the AFT laid out that announcement, sure. When the AFT laid out that announcement this summer, shortly after that, there were groups of unions around the country who had a day of action or a day of resistance, and they listed in their demands all sorts of things that had nothing to do with schools, everything from paying mortgages and rents to defunding police or hiring more counselors for schools. But it was more about the things that had to do with not being in schools and not dealing with education. The stuff about the rents and the stuff about police, that really caught my eye. So, unions, as anyone that's looked at what their advocacy areas are, know that they push for things that are well outside the education arena, and this is no different.
No, and in fact, Jonathan, that's one of the things. Every time a contract comes up, I've been covering teacher strikes all the way back to 1979, and they'd say it's all about the kids, and then you say, okay, so get in and start teaching the kids. Nope, not till our demands are met. And they would make demands not just on salary and benefits, health care and a paycheck, but they were asking for, we want control of curriculum. We want control of how long the class periods are. A lot of things that I always thought were the job of the managers of the school, the principals, vice principals, superintendent, those kind of calls. But the union wants to run those as well. And it seemed to me, in some ways, Jonathan, would you comment on this? In some ways, there's a silver lining to this. It's not short term and it's not immediate, but the long term benefit is I think a lot of American parents are waking up to the fact that they're held hostage to government run schools, and that if the dollars followed the student the way they do in Medicare, in Medicaid, in food stamps, in 100 other government programs where you can take your dollars anywhere you want and spend them where you think is best, American parents have never had that opportunity to any great degree. And this may get it for them. It may not get it for them this year, but I think there's going to be a groundswell of parents saying, if you're not going to take my kid in and educate him, and I'm still paying taxes, along with all the other non-parents like me who are paying taxes, then give me the money and I'll take it out and I'll spend it elsewhere to do the best by my son or daughter. And I think that's a reasonable reaction. The problem is you're not going to get that satisfaction right now, but it may happen in the next year or two because of what parents are experiencing right now.
Well, sure, but there are even numbers this fall that show that some of this changing of the minds is taking place. In Texas, the Homeschool Association there was reporting a 400% increase in interest from parents looking to homeschool there. There are folks in Connecticut who are saying that they had never seen so much interest in homeschool from the local homeschool association up there. There's an NPR article that was run in Minnesota that talked about overwhelming interest in homeschooling there. We also, fortunately now, are seeing that the closures among private schools have stopped, because I think many were afraid that private schools wouldn't survive going into the fall after the closures. And now there's news from around the country that parents are thinking of private schools again and starting to move their children out of the assigned schools because they're worried about them being closed for long periods of time. So we are starting to see this, and surveys are bearing it out.
Well, and although, Jonathan, I'll point, and I don't know how widespread this phenomenon is, but I know in my own backyard in the states of Oregon and Washington, the governors who said we want shutdowns of public schools also extended that to private schools, even private schools that said, look, we're operating on an entirely different basis. We can control the setting, the size of the setting, masks, and all the rest of that. Leave us alone. And unfortunately, the courts in some of the more liberal states have said if the governor says shut the schools down, then they all shut down, and they all have to follow the same rules. I think that may be something they can challenge in court and say, we're different, we're handling things differently, you can't put us under the same set of rules. But so far, in some states, they've been successful in doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the parents in the states where they haven't done that and the private schools have stayed open, I think the parents have been a lot more satisfied with the options they have for their children. Places like South Carolina and some of the other states where the private schools have been allowed to stay open. And look, I think what we've seen from even the private schools that have been opened in cities where the public schools are closed, I think of places like Chicago, for example, and we have not seen major outbreaks. This is what policymakers need to be looking at as they think about getting big cities such as New York City reopened again, right? If it's, if we are keeping kids safe in private schools, why then we should be prepared to use the same protocols to get kids back into their assigned schools.
So tell me this, when it comes to this criteria they set in New York City, it's the most conservative threshold, saying if we see a 3% positive test rate for China virus over a 7-day period, we shut the whole system down. Now, do you think that both Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo deliberately set it low to keep their union friends happy by saying, we'll set a barrier so low that the schools will get closed down and then we'll give you the leverage you need? Because I wonder if they're making the best decision in terms of public health, in terms of students, or are they making the best decision for their friends in the Democrat Party and in the labor unions?
Well, that's a good question because they didn't seem to be on the same page yesterday. The governor actually got in a bit of a shouting match with the media at a press event because he didn't think that schools were going to close. And then it turned out shortly after the press event that the mayor did close down schools in the afternoon, right, the day before, which sent parents scrambling. So it's hard to say exactly whether what's going on with the leadership there. I mean, I think the important thing to remember are the evidence from the groups that are looking at this stuff, everything from Brown University, who's tracking the rates actually within schools, to the American Association of Pediatrics, to even UNICEF had a report out today talking about how important it is to get kids back in class. So I think the big goal here that we have to keep in mind is that we are threatening the futures of these kids if they miss out on learning core subjects. Not to mention, the experience of just getting the things that they need in school. And
Jonathan,
so,
I've got to cut it off because I'm up against the clock. Jonathan, I may even play that soundbite soon involving Andrew Cuomo getting a little hot under the collar when a reporter started asking him, are the schools going to close? And as usual, the New York governor is clueless. We'll be back in just a moment. That's Jonathan Butcher from the Heritage Foundation, and this is the Lars Larson Show.